Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the Take30 this morning. So the focus of today's session is going to be on Cognos Analytics, deeper dive into data modules and dashboards. And really, this is about a modern approach to analytics, leveraging functionality that exists in Cognos today. So for the agenda, we're going to do an intro. We'll talk about a data module promotion lifecycle and talk about the concept of a global data module. Talk about how we can leverage dashboards to expose the information in data modules, go through a scenario, and then do a demo, and then open it up for Q&A. Certainly, though, if you have questions as we go, please put them into the question form inside of GoToWebinar, and we will answer them. So the first thing I want to do here before I hand it over to Glenn is to launch a poll. All right, and the poll is which future Cognos topics would you like to have us cover? So let me close the poll and let me share the results. So it seems like the majority of folks want to know about best practices for a healthy Cognos environment, followed up by some of the new features, so AI, natural language query, and explorations in Cognos Analytics. Okay, great. So just a reminder of future events. Today we're focused on a deeper dive into dashboards and data modules. Next week we're going to cover Power BI data flows, and then the week after that is some integration approaches for Cognos Analytics and Amazon Web Services. A reminder that the Take30 one-to-ones are still available. You can go to our Strategies for Success page and find those. Also, a Take30 survey is coming soon to capture your feedback on this entire program. And as I said last week, these Take30 sessions will continue through all of 2020. And the formats and the days will be a little bit different, but we're going to continue that through the year. Okay. So Glenn is a senior consultant on my team. He's been here for, I think, almost 4 years. He's going to do the presentation and demo today. My name is Scott Masage. I'm the practice director for BI at Ironside, and I've been here almost 8 years. So with that, I'll let you take it away, Glenn.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. So we want to talk about a couple of concepts today, and the first one is data module promotion lifecycle. It's probably a more glamorous name, but we'll go with that for now. And this is the concept that data modules, which are the new version of modeling in Cognos Analytics, can be that capability can be given to someone at a business level, right? And they can build a data module, roll in their own data with it, vet it, and then at some point in time, that's going to be promoted into a production data module managed by IT. So the benefit of this is that the business knows their data, right? They're gonna vet everything. They're gonna refine it, add enhancements, calculations, and things like that. At some point in time, maybe they're gonna run into some complexity they can't deal with. Security that they need to have implemented, and of course, if that security is already implemented at the IT level in a global data module, then they they would want to roll that into that global data module essentially. So at the point where IT takes over, they're going to revalidate it, make sure it adheres to standards, do any kind of tweaks, refinements, optimization. The business might be getting the data from the wrong place. Even if it's right, there may be a better place to get it. So once that happens, the module is going to be deployed, and then the business will have access to it again. So there are some really good benefits to this approach, and from a business perspective. So as I mentioned before, the business does know their own data. So who better to to build a metadata layer than the business if they have the capability to do it. You're going to have fewer, if any, IT bottlenecks because you're working in-house if you're on the business side. So there's a potential for fewer bottlenecks because you're not going back and forth with with an analyst, with someone who's doing the development for you. It also kind of it promotes more data exploration and really helps you get to answers faster. On the IT side, obviously, it's not a draw on your IT resources. You don't have to allocate people to build something for marketing or for sales or whoever. For the most part, the business is doing this themselves. So again, there are costs associated with this, and the business incurs them. So if you're on the IT side, it's a win there. So again, by the time IT does get involved, the data modules are typically vetted, and the data is right, the business is happy with what they're getting. So that's one less concern, one fewer worry. Okay, so some other considerations, that we can call them risk considerations, but just things to keep in mind. There is a learning curve, and it is much, much less than if you are learning Framework Manager. So I don't know if anyone here has worked with Framework, but it takes quite a skilled person to work with Framework. So I would say that if you are at a level where you're creating visualizations and pivot tables in Excel, then you can pick this up. There is a potential for IT blind spots, meaning that the business is probably going to like this enough that they're going to start building content, and so it can get out of hand. You want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on that. So the communication is necessary, but of course communication is always necessary. So there will be a scenario where you start getting some calls from the business saying, hey, I'm not quite sure how to do this. Can you take a look at this? And that might be an indication it's time to start thinking about this module being, promoted into an IT managed scenario. So the key thing is it requires a process to ensure success here. And, there are a lot of things to consider as you start looking at this concept. All right, smaller copy. So the concept of global data modules is pretty straightforward. Data modules can be based on data servers, they can be based on data sets, so you can upload your own files, legacy Cognos package. They can also be based on other data modules. And that presents a very powerful approach to modeling, where these IT managed data modules can be leveraged at the business level, so that the business can, enrich them by creating their own data modules based on the IT modules. I think it was a roundabout way of saying that, but essentially you build your own data module based on IT managed data modules. So you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to put the effort into creating product dimensions, other dimensions. You don't have to worry about security. So your data module would inherit from the IT based global modules. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel, and it allows you to focus more on, enriching, exploring, answering business questions, and adding value. So the data modules, and I'm gonna hit the second bullet point first. The really cool thing is that data modules and the dashboarding interface is a very, very consistent look and feel. So as you become more proficient with data modules, then building your dashboards, navigating the metadata tree, knowing where to get to properties and things like that, it feels more intuitive. And building data modules is very easy to implement features like relative time, data grouping or binning, and security. So the really cool thing is that these features deploy very quickly, very easily, and they're easy to leverage when you do start building reports and dashboards. All right, so we're going to go through a quick demo. We're going to create a new data module. It's going to be based on 2 existing managed data modules in this scenario. We're going to add to the data module, enrich it a little bit, and then we're going to build a quick dashboard. So at this point, we can go ahead and jump right into that.
Okay, so Glenn, I'm going to give you presenter, but I'm also going to address a few questions that have come in. So let me make you presenter now. All right. So the first question, do I need to be a licensed administrator to be able to create these data modules? So I'll take that one. Actually, while the license administrator role can create these objects, so can analytics users and analytics explorers. So it's a pretty broadly available in terms of a licensing scheme capability. Okay, another question. Is this ability open by default? Is there any way that we can secure it or control it? So this is controlled, much like everything in Cognos. Most things can be secured, and that's a true statement here as well. If you go into capabilities in the administrative interface, you have the ability to secure this and call out which users or groups can leverage it. Okay. All right. Those are the questions for now. Glenn, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Is everyone seeing my screen, the Cognos landing screen?
I can certainly see it.
Perfect. Just making sure. All right. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to create our own data module. So I'm going to put on a couple of different hats during this scenario and kind of bounce back and forth, but it's all to illustrate some of the concepts that we talked about here just a few minutes ago. So I'm going to create a new data module, and that data module is going to be created based on a couple of existing data modules. In this scenario, we have IT managed data modules. They're curated by IT. They're exposed to me, so I have access to them, and I can select one or two or both of these. In this case, I'm going to select both. All right. So let's take a quick look at what we have here. I'm going to pull these out so they're a little bit easier to look at. So my data modules, both of these data modules, each one contain their own star schema. One was sales and one was sales target. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to build a dashboard that combined both of these together. So I wanted to bring them into one data module because I also want to add a relationship so that I can report across sales fact and sales target fact. So, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. First thing I want to do here is I want to create a folder, a couple of folders actually, to group my tables so that when I present them to my users, it's going to be a little bit cleaner. All right. And what you'll notice here is that these are all in green, which means that they're just references. You can see the link here, the chain, and that indicates that they're references. And in the reference data modules, these folders that were created as part of the process are hidden, so we won't see those when we expose this to the users. And I'll just really quickly, I'll show that. So that it makes it a lot cleaner. So we're really quickly enriching what we're doing here, cleaning up the metadata so that we can present it to the users. So one of the other things that we would like to be able to do is to bucket our data by say current year, prior year, current month, prior month. We'd like to be able to do period over period type analysis and comparison. And when I look at my date dimension, I see each individual member, but I don't see the buckets I want. So what I could do at this point is I can reach out to the IT team and I can say, hey, shouldn't this have these buckets? Or just say that I've got my own relative time buckets that I want to implement. I can provide that to IT. And what IBM has done, and I'll show you this in just a second. I'm gonna go ahead and save this. But what IBM has done is they've implemented the concept of relative time in a really neat, kind of easy, quick to get going kind of way. So let me demo start. We're just going to call this demo DM. let me jump back out real quick. I'm going to close this. All right, and I am going to jump into the, I'm going to put my other hat on now, so now I'm in IT, and I'm going to jump into the sales data module that was created, and I'm going to start taking a look at what we have in here, and sure enough, I see that we don't have the relative time buckets that we talked about. So I'm going to very quickly implement that, and then I'll let the business know, and the really cool thing is that the data module that they created is going to reflect this automatically. So to do this, I'm going to add a new source, and I'm going to browse the team content. And these calendars, there are basic calendars that are delivered with your samples, and so these will all be in there. And these fiscal calendars, or these calendars, I'm going to use a fiscal calendar July 1. They have pre-configured buckets, all right? And if I look at them, you can kind of get a look at what they are. So we've got date, month, several different fields, quarter. Now going back over here, you can see I've got a green reference to a data set essentially that was created here. Now to implement this, what I need to do is I've got to apply this to a date field that's in our model. All right, so notice we have our members here. I'm going to add the fiscal calendar that I just brought in, and magically these buckets that exist in that calendar are added here. So in reporting, we could drag any of these into a report, and it's going to add a filter to that report. The other cool thing I can do is I can take my measures, and then I can apply that same calendar through the date dimension, and it's going to add the same buckets. And if you saw my last session, our last session that I presented, we had implemented this, but I did want to show it again because I think it's one of the very, very foundational features of data modules that makes this so cool. So now I'm going to save the sales data module. All right. Drop back out of that. Go back into our demo data module. And that is not what I'm looking for. And we have the buckets created for us. So we didn't have to do that. And ideally by the time these are curated and out to available to me, they're going to be created already. But just for the purpose of the demo to demonstrate how this carries through into our data module, I wanted to do that. All right. So the next thing I want to do, I'd like to be able to report on country. I'd like to be able to slice this by country. Notice all of these are green to this point. But what I want to do is I want to bring in another table that I can then join back to my sales target fact so that I can slice and dice by country. So to do that, I actually have to add a new source. All right. And that source is going to be a data server. So a data server is essentially a data source connection that's configured within Cognos. It's a JDBC connection. And we're going to use Go Sales. All right, so the table I want is country. I know that. I'm just going to go ahead and bring it in. All right. Now, let's do this and drop it into our sales target folder so that it. All right. Okay, so in a lot of scenarios, what I would probably do is I would model a view from this, but because we're in a hurry, we've got some numbers that we need to get out to someone in the form of our dashboard. I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to delete the fields that I don't want from this. And I'm left with my country code and my country EN. So then I can come back here and I can select the tables I want, right click and add a relationship to that. and I want a one-to-N with the N being many and the many on the target side, and I want the country code to the country code retailer. I'll match the selected columns, and then it will let me verify that this is the data I want to see, and I'll go ahead and create that. All right. So another thing I can do now that I've added country, I can add security to this. Now, keep in mind, I'm adding the security at the level within my module, and oftentimes the security would already exist in the IT curated data module, but maybe I want to further limit it, and I have the ability to do that here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the ellipsis and set data security. I'll add a security definition here. And typically you wouldn't add an individual person, you would create the groups in your authentication provider and then add security, or excuse me, add the users to each group. But in this case, we're just going to add me. All right. So what I want to do at this point is, I know that I just want to be able to see North American countries. So I'm going to look at Canada, Mexico, and the United States. All right. And we can kind of demonstrate how this took effect here in a little while, but essentially we have just, within a matter of a couple of minutes, we've added security to our new data module. All right. So I'm going to drop back into this view. I'm going to go ahead and save this. All right. The next thing I want to do is I want to create a relationship between my sales target fact and my sales fact. So I'm going to select both tables, right click, and add a relationship. And the table you add second, which is, I've just become used to doing my fact second. That way it's always the inside of the relationship. But that's a quick way to keep from having to change that relationship type here, but you can do it. There's a lot of options so that you can change to different types of relationships. So what I know I want to do is I want day and month, because remember our targets are at the month level, right? So I'm gonna configure this to join on I said day and month, year and month. All right, match those selected columns and then refresh. Okay, so I've very quickly added my relationships here. And I'm going to go ahead and save this. I know we're getting pretty close to the end, and I'd like to be able to demonstrate the dashboard piece of this. So I'm going to go and jump really quickly back into the IT managed. And I looked at this a little earlier, and I noticed in my data modules, I'm speeding this up a little bit, that my product brand doesn't have a grouping that I'd really like. And so what I've done is I've reached out to IT. So I'm going to put on my IT hat really quickly. And without a lot of trouble, I can create a group here, product brand. We'll just call it product brand group. And I want to look at my legacy brands. And so these are brands that that have existed for a while. And now we have some new brands that we're calling emerging. And so we'd like to be able to break these out to see how these are performing. So now, very quickly, IT has turned this around. So now everybody who's consuming this is going to see these brands. And we can very, very quickly jump over and back into our data module. And we'll see that we have those brands existing. So that carried over as well. So with that, what I'd like to do is just in 3 minutes build a dashboard for you. It may run over a minute or two, but I think we'll get it pretty we'll get it done pretty quickly. All right, so I'm just going to select a tab template that I like. Now remember, we created a relationship earlier on our sales target date gem. I would like to be able to add filters just to this tab only, by year and by quarter. Well, all right. So the first thing I'd like to be able to see here is my sales target. So I'm going to put that up here. Then in sales, I'd like to be able to see that next to my actual sales. And I'm not sure, I guess, oh, well, that would make sense because I grabbed the wrong thing. So I am going to drag the actual revenue here so I can compare my revenue. I'm going to bounce back down to my sales target. I'm going to add it to this cell, into this cell, and let's go to our properties chart. We'll call that legacy target. Emerging target. Now we're going to apply those filters that we just created, or those buckets, excuse me, that we created earlier. And this is a really quick way of doing that here. So when we created that bucket, now we see emerging brands and legacy brands. So in legacy brands, I'm going to add a local filter, just drag that member in here, select my emerging brands, do the same thing here. And now we're starting to, we're starting to develop something that might look like a dashboard. So really quickly, I'm going to add a table. And I want that table to actually be here. And I'd like to look at my sales by targets by month. So I'm going to open up my date gem. I'm going to bring in month. Then I'm going to bring in my target over here. Then finally from sales fact, I'm going to bring in revenue. Let's just give it a second to refresh. And then I'll bring in revenue. So notice we're left with, while this is refreshing, we have the month numbers in here. I think I really would rather see the month description. So I'm going to add the month description right here. And I don't want to see summaries. And actually, I don't want the month in here. So I'm going to delete that real quick. And now what we're seeing is that our sorting is not what we would like. It's sorting alphabetically. So I'm going to go in here and I can manually sort this. So if something isn't sorted the way that I wanted, I can do a custom sort. And so I can just go to January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, and November. Oh, and I missed July, but that's okay. You guys, it'll be a little out of order, but that's all right. We're running up on the hour. All right, so I can very quickly sort this. Now, the last thing I really wanted to show you is that a lot of people like the data in a table, but we can quickly change between different styles of chart. And so going really quickly to a column chart, we can see that our bars, which actually represent revenue, and and the lines that represent our target. So we can see that for each month here, we've exceeded our target. Finally, one last thing, and then we can wrap it up. So these revenue buckets, just say I wanted to see current quarter, current month. Let's just go current month. versus prior month. So these buckets that we created earlier, the time buckets, the relative time, very quickly can be rolled into a dashboard. And we're a couple minutes over, but that's basically what I wanted to show. So the concepts that we wanted to get across are that we can quickly build data modules, we can quickly enrich them, we can leverage content that's curated through IT and then add our own and turn that into a dashboard very quickly. That's pretty much all I had, Scott.
All right, Glenn, thank you very much for taking us through that. We're out of time, but I do want to just let you all know that there'll be one more session on the current registration, and then the next set will require you to go in and re-register for the next set. So just kind of an administrative note there. Thank you very much for joining, and if you have any follow-up questions, just send them our way. Thank you very much. Nice job, Glenn.
Thanks, everyone.